Japan has spent decades convincing the world it does not fight wars. Now it is preparing for one. This shift did not arrive with speeches or parades. It arrived quietly, through budgets, factories, and shipyards. Japan has just approved a defense budget worth $55 billion, the largest in its post-war history, bigger than what South Korea and Australia spend combined. That alone should have raised alarms. But money is not the real story. Japan is not racing to build the biggest fleet or the loudest air force. It is building something far more deliberate: weapons designed to end battles before they spread, systems meant to turn distance into denial and geography into control. Several of these capabilities are already active today. For more than 70 years, Japan lived behind legal restraints. Its military was labeled a self-defense force. Offensive war was forbidden. Real protection came from the United States and its nuclear shield. That arrangement held while threats stayed theoretical. They are not theoretical anymore. China now operates the largest navy in the world by ship count. Its Coast Guard presses into Japanese-controlled waters with growing confidence. Around the Senkaku Islands, Chinese vessels circle again and again. Military aircraft probe Japanese airspace so often that interceptions feel routine. Then came the moment that changed everything. In the year 2022, during military exercises near Taiwan, 5 Chinese ballistic missiles landed inside Japan's exclusive economic zone, not nearby, inside. It was not an accident. It was a signal. Japan did not answer with outrage. It answered with acceleration. Instead of chasing numbers, Japan chose leverage. It chose precision over mass. It chose systems that punish movement, expose fleets, and strike from distances that rewrite engagement timelines. For an island nation with limited depth, every naval clash is existential. That reality now drives one central question: can Japan build a defense force advanced enough to deter China without firing first? And can it do so fast enough to matter? The answer is already taking shape. Right now, Japan is deploying 10 technologies that are not future promises. They are real systems, built, tested, entering service, and together, they explain why Beijing is paying very close attention. The Maritime Self-Defense Force of Japan operates one of the most sophisticated destroyer fleets on Earth. In the year 2020, it unveiled something that changed the calculus of naval warfare: the Maya-class guided missile destroyer, equipped with the Aegis Baseline J7 system and a cooperative engagement capability that turns individual ships into nodes in a single, distributed kill chain. Here is why that matters. Traditional naval warfare depends on a simple principle. Each ship fights on its own, using its own radar to detect threats, and its own missiles to engage them. A Chinese anti-ship missile traveling at roughly Mach 3 gives a destroyer about 90 seconds from detection to interception. If it misses, the ship dies. The new destroyers of Japan do not fight alone. They share targeting data in real time across the entire fleet. A destroyer 200 miles away can fire missiles at a target it cannot see, using radar data transmitted from an allied ship or aircraft. The system cuts reaction time sharply and effectively doubles engagement range. But here is the real turning point. This is not only about missiles. Japan is integrating directed energy weapons onto the same platforms: high-energy lasers that can shoot down drones, cruise missiles, and aircraft at the speed of light for the cost of diesel fuel. A prototype developed by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries has already shown successful intercepts against multiple drone swarms. The cost per engagement is only a few dollars per shot. Compare that to a standard surface-to-air missile that can cost a few $1,000,000. In a long naval battle against drone swarms, exactly the tactic China would use to overwhelm Japanese defenses. This is the difference between surviving and running out of interceptors in the first hour. And Japan is not stopping at destroyers. Engineers are retrofitting this technology onto frigates, patrol boats, and even Coast Guard cutters. Within a few years, Japan will field one of the most heavily laser-equipped surface fleets in the Pacific. Ask any naval strategist what weapon they fear most in a Pacific conflict, and the answer is often the same: submarines. Japan operates a little more than 20 conventionally powered attack submarines, quiet, lethal, and optimized for the shallow waters and narrow straits around the Japanese archipelago. But raw numbers do not tell the full story. The unique danger of the submarine force of Japan comes from lithium-ion battery technology. Traditional diesel-electric submarines face one hard limitation. They must surface or snorkel frequently to recharge batteries, exposing themselves to detection. The newest Taige-class submarines of Japan use lithium-ion batteries instead of lead-acid, the first operational submarines in the world to do so. The result is that submerged endurance stretches from days to weeks, recharge time drops dramatically, and the acoustic signature, already among the quietest on Earth, becomes nearly undetectable. In simulated war games by American naval analysts, a single Japanese submarine positioned in the Miyako Strait, the gap between Okinawa and Taiwan, can hold an entire Chinese carrier strike group at risk, not only through torpedoes, but through strategic ambiguity. If Chinese admirals do not know where the submarine is, they cannot safely transit, and if they cannot transit, they cannot project power into the wider Pacific. There is one problem that rarely gets attention: crew availability. An aging population means fewer recruits for the demanding, claustrophobic world of submarine duty. So, Japan is accelerating work on autonomous underwater vehicles that can act as escorts, mine hunters, and sensor platforms. Within the next decade, analysts expect each manned submarine to command a small group of artificial intelligence-controlled drones, multiplying undersea presence without adding more humans. Japan is an island nation. That geographic reality shapes every part of its defense strategy and creates one glaring vulnerability. If an adversary controls the sea and the air around Japan, the country suffocates. This is why the development of hypersonic cruise missiles is more than a modest upgrade. It is an existential insurance policy. Ballistic missiles follow predictable arcs. Hypersonic cruise missiles do not. They fly at speeds above Mach 5 while maneuvering unpredictably at low altitude. Current air defense systems, including the Chinese S-400 and HQ-9, struggle to intercept them, not because the radars cannot see them, but because the missiles can change course faster than interceptors can react. The hypersonic program of Japan, developed with the United States, focuses on two main variants: a ship-launched anti-ship missile with a range beyond 1,000 miles, and a ground-launched precision strike weapon aimed at enemy air bases and naval facilities. Here is the strategic logic. If Japan can hold Chinese naval ports at risk from Japanese territory, China cannot safely concentrate its fleet for an amphibious invasion of Taiwan or Japan. The missiles do not need to sink every ship. They only need to create enough uncertainty that planners in Beijing cannot guarantee success. The weapon is not expected to be fully deployed until the second half of this decade, but test launches have already drawn criticism from Chinese state media, which labels the system destabilizing, diplomatic language that usually means it works as intended. Japan operates one of the largest fleets of F-35 fighters outside the United States, with well over 100 aircraft split between Air Force and Marine variants and more on order. But these are American planes, built to American specifications, with software controlled by American providers. So, what happens if American support is delayed or priorities shift? The answer from Tokyo is clear: build a domestic option. The Mitsubishi FX program, officially designated F3, is the first homegrown stealth fighter design of Japan since the era of World War II. In partnership with Britain and Italy under the Global Combat Air Program, Japan is developing a sixth-generation fighter with distributed sensors, artificial intelligence-assisted targeting, and loyal wingman drone integration. Here is the interesting part. Unlike the F-35, which puts stealth at the center of its design, the F-3 emphasizes network warfare. The aircraft acts like a flying command node, coordinating attacks across manned fighters, unmanned combat drones, surface ships, and ground-based missile batteries. Think of it less as a single fighter jet and more as an airborne quarterback calling plays in real time. The timeline is ambitious, with the first flight before the end of the next decade and operational deployment in the following years. If it succeeds, Japan will join a very small club of nations able to design, build, and field advanced stealth fighters entirely on its own, a group currently limited to the United States, China, and Russia. Japan is not waiting for the F-3 to bring drones into the fight. Demonstrations in the mid-2020s have already shown autonomous combat drones flying in formation with manned fighters, executing air-to-air maneuvers, and conducting one-way strikes on ground targets. Each drone costs only a few $1,000,000, while one F-35 can cost well above $90 million. That means Japan can field dozens of expendable drones for the price of a single manned jet. In a drawn-out air war against a numerically superior Chinese Air Force, that ratio becomes crucial. Modern warfare is not won only by missiles and aircraft. It is also won in the invisible world of satellites, communication networks, and navigation signals. Japan understands this reality. That is why it is quietly building some of the most sophisticated cyber and electronic warfare capabilities in Asia. In the early 2020s, Japan created a Space Operations Group, a dedicated unit charged with protecting Japanese satellites, tracking foreign space activity, and developing options to counter adversary systems. In simple terms, Japan is preparing for a conflict in which GPS goes dark, communication satellites are jammed, and reconnaissance platforms vanish. This matters because modern precision weapons rely heavily on satellite navigation. A destroyer missile, a fighter bomb, or even an artillery round often depends on GPS coordinates. Take away GPS, and a guided munition that costs a few $1,000,000 becomes a very expensive unguided projectile. Japan answers this challenge on two tracks. First, by hardening its own systems, building redundancy into networks, encrypting satellite links, and developing navigation methods that do not depend on GPS, such as terrain matching and celestial navigation. Second, by working on offensive cyber and electronic tools that can disrupt the networks of an adversary. Analysts describe future scenarios in which Japanese electronic warfare aircraft jam Chinese military communications across the Taiwan Strait, or blind the radar of Chinese destroyers without firing a physical shot. This is warfare by digital paralysis, and it is extremely hard to detect until it is already in motion. Japan controls more than 6,000 islands. Most are uninhabited rocks, barely large enough for a lighthouse. In modern conflict, each one is a potential missile site. That is exactly how Japan now treats them. Under an island defense initiative, Japan is turning its southern island chain, stretching from Kyushu toward Taiwan, into a distributed web of missile launchers, radars, and rapid reaction unit. The Ryukyu Islands, once lightly defended, now host Type 12 surface-to-ship missiles with ranges beyond 200 miles. The strategic effect is clear. Japan creates a maritime no-go zone for Chinese vessels trying to move from the East China Sea into the Pacific. Chinese naval officers sometimes refer to this as the first island chain problem. For the Navy of China to reach the open Pacific, which is essential for projecting power toward Guam, Hawaii, or the west coast of the United States, it must pass through straits. Under the watch of Japan, static defenses invite destruction. So, Japan pairs these missiles with mobility. Truck-mounted launchers can move within hours, making them very hard to hit preemptively. At the same time, Japan is developing decoys and dummy sites to force Chinese reconnaissance assets to waste effort distinguishing real targets from fake ones. There is an even more surprising twist. Japan is quietly preparing to arm some civilian vessels, not traditional warships, but fishing boats, ferries, and cargo ships that can carry containerized anti-ship missiles. In peacetime, they look like normal commercial traffic. In wartime, they become hidden launch platforms, indistinguishable until the moment they fire. It is asymmetric warfare, using the huge merchant marine fleet of Japan as a force multiplier. The entire strategy of Japan is built on avoiding a lonely fight. The country is deepening defense ties with Australia, key European partners, and especially the United States, aiming for a level of planning, training, and intelligence sharing that turns any attack on Japan into a confrontation with a much broader coalition. At sea, the largest warships of Japan, officially labeled helicopter destroyers to fit constitutional limits, are being converted into light carriers, able to operate F-35B stealth jets from short decks and improvised sites. This gives Tokyo flexible air power across the Pacific, despite limited runways on its southern islands. The trade-off is fuel. Vertical takeoff cuts combat radius sharply, so Japan leans on tankers and forward refueling to keep those jets on station long enough to matter. Behind the scenes, Japan is moving fast into military artificial intelligence, using algorithms to detect threats, fuse intelligence, coordinate manned and unmanned platforms, and accelerate decision-making across cyber, air, and maritime domains. Yet Tokyo maintains a strict legal and ethical line. Humans still make the final call on lethal force, even as artificial intelligence suggestions arrive so quickly that commanders struggle to fully unpack them before acting. All of this feeds a doctrine of deterrence by denial. Japan knows it cannot outspend China, so it is building layered alliances, choke point defenses, and advanced technologies designed to make any invasion or coercive campaign so risky and costly that leaders in Beijing think very carefully before ever starting a war. The next 5 years are critical. Japan aims to meet its defense buildup goals by the late 2020s, with deeper structural strengthening by the early 30 decade. The real question is not whether Japan can field these technologies, but whether they arrive in time to keep the Pacific stable and prevent a slide into great power confrontation. Like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you never miss our latest tech breakdowns.